Hello and welcome to Collapse Club, where our topic is, how are we to live in the time of collapse? I am David Baum in Seattle, and with me today is Kimberley Hare from Hertfordshire in England. Hello, Kimberley.
Hello, delighted to be here, David. Thanks.
Kim, you have a community group, you lead a community group, the purpose of which is to help people find what it is for them to do in these tumultuous times. Could you tell us a little bit about your mission, please?
Yes, so HEART, which is a cute little acronym that stands for Hertfordshire Enabling and Adapting for Resilience Together. And it's all about local community resilience and adaptation in the face of the meta crisis. So we do a mixture of things: education, advocacy, psychological, emotional, spiritual support, and we run retreats and workshops designed to help people stand tall and look it all in the face, but from a place of resilience, courage, and clarity, and to answer that question, what is mine to do? Because I think most people would agree that there are a gazillion answers to that question. And what's important is that people take the time and space to discover that for themselves.
And what is it that you are responding to? What is the impetus that drives you to make this offering?
Well, I say, I call it the meta crisis as a kind of umbrella term. I woke up to this about 6 years ago now, and began to see all of the interconnected predicaments that we face. Yeah, so I think we accept in HEART Community Group that we are facing collapse, certainly severe unraveling, and indeed it's already going on in other parts of the world. But even in the UK, we're seeing it more and more as the weeks and months go by. So it's a response to, one of the little strap lines that we use is, if we wait for the government, it'll be too late. If we act as individuals, it'll be too little. If we act as communities, that's our best bet. Not, and I don't say that, to say that if we come together as communities, we can turn it all around. I don't mean that. And I don't mean some kind of techno-utopian fix. I mean, it's our best chance for supporting one another with kindness, with love, with empathy, and finding ways to become as resilient as we can, but together rather than apart.
So it's the relationships that matter, the building of community that gives people strength.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and that's one of the 7 pathways that I've come up with, and in my retreats and workshops, we explore these 7 paths, and it's not meant to be a kind of a how-to, here are the 7 steps, or anything so mechanistic as that, but it's kind of directions to look in for ourselves. And I kind of frame it as because ultimately I think this is a spiritual inquiry as much as anything else, and as well as a practical one, but it impacts everything, our whole lives, how we approach everything, what we make important, what we see is no longer important, and so on. So it doesn't lend itself to a neat set of how-tos. We have to grapple with the mystery of it, the ineffability of it, but we do appear to be able to discern what I'd call a through line which is often at a deeper level than simply looking at what we get up and do each day. So as a personal example, I believe my through line is love, and that's manifested in many different ways over my life. Right now, my particular thread to pick up is offering free psychological, emotional, spiritual support to others who are waking up or have woken up to the meta crisis. So 5, 10, 30 years ago, what I was doing each day would have looked very different, but actually, I think it was still always driven by love as a core value. Does that make sense?
It does. And you've identified these 7 pathways,
Yeah.
which are, well, we'll find out what they are. I think you have a
Yes.
presentation to show us.
Yes, I do. Shall I do that now?
Yes, please. I think it'd be great.
Okay. Yeah. So here they are. And I'm just going to say a very few words about each one. I'm very happy to share with you after this call. I've written a kind of paper/essay which goes into more detail about all of these things. So as I say, very happy to share that. So number 1 is find the quiet within. I'm very fond of the poem by Martha Postlethwaite, which goes, I've got it on my wall here. Do not try and change the whole world or do anything grandiose. Instead, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and wait there patiently until the song that is your life falls into your cupped hands and you recognize and greet it. Only then will you know how to give yourself to this world. And I think the really important line in that for me is create a clearing in the dense forest of your life. I think it's difficult. I think it's difficult or even impossible to perceive the gentle whisper of, our inner wisdom without having a somewhat clear mind. It's like trying to hear a flute, a very quiet, gentle flute, whilst there's a very loud brass band playing in your head at the same time. So that's really the first one, to create a clearing, to find the quiet. And of course, there's a load of ways of doing this, including meditation, mindfulness, nature, embodying practices, breath work, prayer, rituals, ceremonies, psychedelics, plant medicines, journaling, the list goes on and on. But that's number 1.
Thank you.
Okay. Find your joy. Find your joy. And not suggesting this is always easy when we're fully awake to what's going on. And I believe it's absolutely necessary and possible. Another favorite quote is from Wendell Berry: be joyful, although you have considered all the facts. I love that. So discovering for yourself what makes your heart sing, and where does that take you? And for me, this is not just an outside-in thing. For me, joy is different. It's deeper than happiness or pleasure or satisfaction. It's much more profound than that, and it comes from inside rather than outside, and has nothing to do with our external circumstances. I believe it's one of a number of qualities that we're born with. It's innate in humans. When we are at home in ourselves, it automatically bubbles up. And there are times, and I'm sure we've all hopefully felt times like this, where I just feel I want to burst with joy. And it's not because of something that's happened. It's more a question of seeing through our story about why we can't be joyful at the moment. So it's kind of subtractive rather than additive. It's not about adding joy on top. It's about seeing through the illusion of mostly our thinking that gets in the way. And when I say thinking, I mean thinking that doesn't look like thinking. It looks like truth or reality, but it's actually still thinking. And of course, as well as joy, we also experience all sorts of other feelings, and that's fine. And I believe they should be kind of fully felt and experienced, rather than trying to push them away. I think suffering so often, often the suffering that comes from trying so hard not to feel what we consider to be unpleasant feelings is worse than actually just feeling them, because they pass. They pass, actually, as long as we're not kind of trying to manipulate them. So find your joy. Number 3, reconnect with nature. Maybe there's a better way to put this, because of course we are nature. So in a way it's absurd to say reconnect with nature. And it might even not quite nail it to say reconnect. For many people it's connect, because of the kind of lives that they live now, being completely disconnected from it, especially if we live in cities and we're staring at a screen all day. Interestingly, there's been some recent studies into plant medicines, psychedelics, and are showing that there are lots of things that people report after a trip that's kind of properly supervised, but one of the common things that's universal is people report afterwards a sense that they have become one with nature, and they no longer see themselves as separate from it. So there's a kind of a developing a reverence for all of life. And the only word that seems to fit there for me is awe, A-W-E, an awe for nature and all of life. So I think we can learn to rewild ourselves a bit. And again, in the longer essay, there are lots of ideas for how to do that. You can probably predict a lot of them. But really getting in touch with the seasons and what's going on in nature with its rhythms, learning from Indigenous people, taking the time to truly appreciate it, growing our own food, walking barefoot, using our senses more, watching sunsets and sunrises, talking to trees, foraging food, again, look at the stars. The list goes on and on for that as well. So reconnect with nature.
Thank you.
Find the others. This is a picture of me at my most recent Edge retreat with this bunch of wonderful souls. And it's one of the few things I'd say out of all of the 7 where I'd be a bit prescriptive. Don't try and do this on your own. There is tremendous nourishment, healing, strength in our relationships, as you said. People can inspire us, remind us of our own strength and courage when we falter, and help us see through our own blind spots. So none of us are as smart as all of us, or as wise as all of us. So by working and struggling and laughing and crying and celebrating and playing and reimagining together, we begin to see through the illusion of separation that I think is the core of the meta crisis that we find ourselves in, actually. Disconnection from ourselves and our deeper nature, from each other, and from nature, of course. So it kind of Finding the others sends out ripples through the culture, and this is what we're finding in Hertfordshire, and starts kind of corroding that culture of individualism. That's find the others. Courage and acceptance. Courage and acceptance. James Baldwin, not everything that is faced can be changed, but nothing can be changed until it is faced. So courage, I believe courage is like a muscle and can be developed. I think the more you do it, the more courageous you get. As the very old book title says, feel the fear and do it anyway. And we can do that when we insightfully recognize our own patterns of insecure, egoic thinking. And when we make something else more important than that, than our own insecurity, when our mission is a higher priority. Interestingly, I find talking with lots of people, and I've experienced this myself, there's a resistance to answering the question, what is mine to do? That stems from fear. You know, I may not be enough, I may fail. Who am I to want to do that? All of that kind of stuff. And so it seems easier to just keep searching. We become a perpetual seeker. We become a perpetual, yeah, but what is it? What is it? What is it? When really it's just fear. Yeah. The benefits of acceptance of reality as it is have been well discussed in your Collapse Club programs, especially you know, Michael Dowd and others, and I agree with all of those. And I don't think acceptance is the same as apathy or resignation at all. But again, in the longer essay, I provide lots of examples of approaches, specific processes that can help us come to courage and acceptance.
Sounds great.
Get comfortable with your feelings, all of them. Get comfortable with uncertainty. You know, it's okay to be human and to feel all these things. You don't need to be scared of your feelings, and so many of us are. All they're telling you about is your thinking in the moment, and they're not bad or wrong, so we can accept them. But it's often not telling you anything about the world out there, actually. And it doesn't mean there's anything wrong with you. So a phrase I often use is feel the feelings, but you can drop the story about what they mean. Yeah. Okay. Nearly there. Self-inquiry. So sometimes people find that what's theirs to do simply arrives without any intellectual or conscious, you know, forcing or effort. And we know it when we see it. But for many people, once we've found the quiet and we've tuned in to that, it can be hugely helpful to ask ourselves really powerful questions. One of the most useful formats I found for that kind of grew out of the 4 R's of deep adaptation: resilience, relinquishment, restoration, reconciliation. People probably know those questions. I can send them if not. And I've actually added 2 more in the last year. One is reimagining. what is the story of all life that I'm proud to tell now? How can we imagine and begin to create the more beautiful world that our hearts know is possible, using Charles Eisenstein's book title? And the other one is reverence. So they're both R's, so we now have 6 R's. And the questions under reverence that people find useful are things like, what do you want me to know? So you're asking the universe, you're asking source, you're asking God, whatever you want to call it. What do you want me to know? Who do you want me to be? What do you want me to do? It's as simple as that. How can I tell the story with my life that I'm proud to tell, no matter what happens? So it's not about being attached to outcomes. So just to finish, examples of threads, I just put a few up here. Amanda Scott, reimagining the future through writing and art. Ruth and Ben are 2 people I've got to know in the UK who've set up climate emergency centres across the UK, which are community hubs. My 2 colleagues from Heart Community Group do loads of stuff that builds local community gardens, community choirs, repair cafes, food banks. And that's very definitely their thread. That's when they come alive, doing things like that. I've put some other more professorial type people up there whose thread is, you know, challenging and educating governments and other institutions. My one I've already said, and so many others. Cleaning up a river, raising resilient kids, throwing soup at sunflowers. So yeah, there's as many threads as there are people. So in conclusion, there are many paths. So what I've offered is a smorgasbord of approaches, and some of these will be more appealing to some than to others. And I've come to see that, you know, after many, many, many emotional roller coasters over the past few years, it's actually a real privilege, as Joanna Macy says, to be alive at this time. What an adventure. This is a liminal time, and we can really choose to be in service to all of life. And this was a lovely little picture from one of our big events recently where 100 people got in a room and were brainstorming about various things. So, yeah. There we are. Gosh, I don't know how long that took.
Long enough. Just exactly right. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. And I'd be really interested, you know, not now if there's not time, but in your take on all this. What have you found? What have you found helpful?
Oh, well, that, as you say, that's a deep question. I'd like to just go over what you've shown us. I'd like to mention that I will arrange with you to get the printed versions or the document versions that'll be available through the video description, so people can access those. Find the quiet within, find your joy, reconnect with nature, find the others, courage and acceptance, get comfortable with feelings, all of them, and self-inquiry.
That's it.
Yeah. At the end, the 6th R, reverence, I found that really resonating with me. At the 3 questions: what do you want me to know? Who do you want me to be? And what do you want me to do? And those questions are addressed to, as you say, source or the universe or I suppose that's the same sort of entity one calls God or something like that. It's a reaching out to what, Kim? What are we reaching out to?
I don't know, but it answers.
That's been your experience. You've engaged in this. Do
Yeah.
you get, is it?
If you're in the right place when you ask, you know, because you've found the stillness, you're open, you're curious, you're filled with acceptance and courage and love, and you're genuinely, you know, so it's kind of, you can call it inner wisdom for people who are uncomfortable with it coming from somewhere else, but no, that's way above my pay grade, David, to describe what that is.
Okay. I noticed that these paths and your program or activity helps people find a thread which seems to include action, but you're very explicit, like this isn't going to turn things around or solve things. What is the value of being in action if we don't believe it's going to solve the problem?
Well, first of all, it's not just about being in action. I think it's about finding a balance between doing and being.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of having a richer, deeper, more profound experience of being alive, even if it ends next week. That's part of it. But I know, you know, when I die, I don't know, I think most people, you know, really do yearn for meaning and purpose and also service, contribution. When they really get right down to it. So, you know, it's about having your life do those things because it's the right thing to do, not because it's necessarily going to have the result you want. As I said, the phrase I love is telling a story with your life that you're proud to tell, no matter what. And I think that's far more meaningful than, you know, acquiring lots of toys and stuff and watching Netflix all the time and eating chocolate.
Well, the reason I love your approach is that it affirms the value of the individual person and the individual life, even in the face of utter chaos and even utter destruction. It doesn't matter, in a way, what the future possible story is, how crazy and ugly and difficult it might be. We don't know really what's going to happen. But no matter what chaos we face, nevertheless, it's within our power, number one, and it is a good thing to manifest our own coherence in the face of chaos. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And it and the other thing about it is, because I emphasize the, you know, that it comes from within, it's not about shoulds or oughts. I haven't got any time for that anymore. No.
One query that perhaps you could help me here. Find the quiet within. I loved the poem, create a clearing in the dense forest of your life and cup your hands so that your story can fill it. I don't remember the exact words, but my my experience sometimes has been I quiet my life, I cup my hands, and what I find there is not this sort of happy beatific vision of serenity and, power and coherence. It's like, oh my God, that's me? That's my life? I had no idea. Oh, what am I going to do? So when you see, what do you do with that true vision of your life when it's not all you might wish it would have been or is?
Uh, I think it's partly about the state you're in when you do it. I think it's also about the extent to which you do the other 6. So it might be a worthwhile exercise for you to look at those 7 and say, what am I neglecting? What is my least developed muscle?
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah. For me, I think it's connecting with others, with the others, which is funny because I spend my time here on YouTube talking to people, wonderful, intelligent people. And yet when I turn the computer off, I have a decent personal life, but especially with the pandemic and especially, oh my gosh, over the holidays, the isolation was just enough to take me all the way out, like just so difficult. So can you talk about, just for my benefit, what are the methodologies for finding the others?
Yeah, sure. Well, there are lots of networks, as you know. There's deep adaptation, there's transition towns. I think you have those in the US. You've got various groups, the work that reconnects groups, religious or spiritual groups, depending on your inclination. Something we're having a lot more of in the UK now are climate cafes, where you go, a bit like, sometimes you have death cafes. We've now got climate cafes where you go and talk about this stuff. So it's finding or creating those networks and communities. And, I mentioned Kate and Chantal in my group who started, they start community gardens, they start choirs, and it's interesting in those things, they hardly ever actually talk about the meta crisis. They do sometimes, increasingly, but it's just about building community. And people love it. They love coming together and, doing something together. I mean, we always have, as a species, we always have loved that. So I guess it's either about tapping into what already exists or creating it. That makes sense? Sorry, that sounds...
It does. No, no. I'm realizing more and more the value of relationship, of connection as an end in itself.
Absolutely, absolutely. And there is although Zoom is wonderful, and I have created great friendships with many people around the world that I would never otherwise have met. There's something about being in a room together or being in the outdoors together and hugging. And looking into each other's eyes in a way that's not always that easy over camera.
I think so. The pandemic poses some challenges, and I think, don't want to get into it. Talking about the pandemic, it's so easy to do. Don't even want to go there. Just saying it's a challenge. I think everyone knows that. Yeah. Finally, this is great, and I look forward to reading your more detailed documentation, which I assume then will have connect points if people are interested in your program, your workshops, etc. They'll be able to find that through the document. Yes.
Yes, they will. I mean, the longer retreats, they're all in the UK, and, you know, often 4 days long. But I do actually plan to run an online workshop just on this, like maybe a 2-hour, 3-hour kind of thing. So once I've got the dates for that sorted, I'll send you that as well.
Very good. Finally, this is about you and how you found that this is your thread. What brought you to be a weaver of threads in the way that you are?
Well, I've got to say, at the risk of repeating myself, it was those 7 things. Some were more important than others for me. And it wasn't an instantaneous thing either, David. It was, you know, it was a sort of a gradual clarity. And also trying lots of things and going, nah. You know, for example, for about 3 or 4 years, I was really getting involved with local politics in Hertfordshire. And I could do it, but it was like, bleh. I'd rather pull my fingernails out. You know, so sometimes it's trying something and finding, you know, that's not it. But it's finding that intersection of, there's a wonderful exercise that I do on the retreat sometimes, which is, and in fact, Michael Dowd mentioned this to me as well. There's like, you look at your greatest joys, you list your greatest joys, essentially, all the things that light you up, nourish you, give you energy. And then in the second column, you look at what the world most needs, or what your community most needs, or what your town most needs. And I think that's where we are most powerful, when those two dovetail, because it's then, you don't have to kind of motivate yourself to do that. It's, you know, you're jumping out of bed in the morning because you can't think of anything better to do. You know, it's like, that's just incredibly meaningful and satisfying.
Thank you for that. And I congratulate you on formulating these steps, which are obviously helpful, but it's obvious once they're together, for you to cohere them and make them available. That is an act of creation and generosity. And I thank you and I congratulate you on your success in doing that.
Well, thank you. And I'm sure there's stuff that's missing, and I'm sure it will kind of get refined. It literally all just came out this weekend. It's this weekend just gone. So before that, it was much more vague and woolly. So yeah, so any blind spots, please tell me, you know, people that watch this or read the essay, because I want to make it a really, really useful contribution.
Thank you. And thank you to the people who have joined us on the live stream and to those who are watching now. I will work with Kim to get the documentary links for people who want to know more. Thank you, Kim. This was Kimberley Hare from Hertfordshire in England, Hertfordshire County, I learned. I'm David Baum in Seattle. This is Collapse Club. Until we meet again, farewell.
Thank you. Bye-bye.